This is Project Gotham Racing 3. We're here on Xbox 360. Be sure to like the video. Subscribing is great as well. So this is the third main entry in the Project Gotham Racing series, PGR. And yeah, it's a bit of a classic Xbox racing franchise that some may remember from back in the day. So this was trying to build upon the foundations of the second PGR and also helping to, basically prep people for what would be PGR 4, which was the final entry in the series. So what are we getting here? I guess it's like 600p at 30 FPS. And yeah, it's really, really jagged around the edges in terms of like the visual fidelity and everything like that. But coming off of PGR 2, which I think was one of the ones we recently did, it's actually not too bad looking in terms of visuals, but I definitely think they did amp things up when it came to PGR 4, which I also checked out. And yeah, I kind of miss this series of racing games. I mean, obviously, when you've got Forza, you don't really need, this franchise, but I did think it was, at the time, pretty cool. And this was like a very early gen racing offering too for Xbox. It's kind of interesting, like they were doing so much and so intensively, like releasing stuff for Xbox, that we were getting, multiple first party racing games, and that's kind of interesting because, we definitely do not get that nowadays. So yeah, there's a couple different ways to play. There was the quick play stuff, which is what we're doing now. There was the career mode where you're earning like the Kudos and everything like that. There was online multiplayer stuff. Quite a bit to this one, and I had a good selection of vehicle options and different things to unlock and different ways to interact with the game. And some of those like early tournament type stuff that they didn't really continue with in gaming, like the early more competitive multiplayer stuff online, whereas like I think you could win, I don't know if it was like Microsoft points. I think that was something this one featured back in the day, and yeah, it's kind of interesting. I remember from this game sort of like, oh wow, that was a quick race. Yeah, I remember one day I was like sick, and I got to skip out on school and went to the grandmother's house, and it was like early on in the 360 era. And I was just sitting there, just playing PGR 3 the whole day. It was kind of fun. Let's jump into the next race here. So anyways, yeah, like I was saying, it was kind of like a fun day at the time, kind of sitting there and just sort of playing this one. I think I was playing this and Chell, and it was one of the few games I had kind of right off the bat, if that makes sense, in terms of just, options for games to play and stuff. Like, it was a lot of fun. Like, it was really enjoyable to play this sort of experience. And I remember trying to do this game. It was all about, as I mentioned, it's the Kudos system, right? So you're earning like these points, and it's like the currency you use to be able to get stuff. And the Kudos is kind of like based on how well you perform. Oh, you can see the Kudos literally in the corner there. So you're constantly trying to like be good enough to get the Kudos as you're playing, and I thought that was an interesting element. And then when you're doing the campaign, like the career mode, a lot of that game is based on the idea of you basically working towards like these medal things, and it was always about getting the platinums. And it was so difficult. Like honestly, I'm on like regular like medium difficulty and stuff. I'm surprised I'm doing so well. It's a bit of a shocker. Is it my car is a better class? Maybe that's what it is. Also driving pretty decently too. I don't remember it being so easygoing, but yeah, the Project Gotham Racing series was very fascinating. I totally forget that this game, visually looked as rough as it does. Like, I remember this looking pretty cutting edge at the time, and it was a very well received, racing game and racing franchise. It is kind of weird that this just sort of, oh, that was bad. That was even worse. It's weird that this series ran out of steam, if that makes sense. Like, I guess there was the whole them kind of, getting brought into Activision, I guess you would say, was kind of a big thing, and then that kind of ended the series, and then we got Blur, and that didn't go over well, and then eventually Bizarre Creations, who developed the series, was shuttered, right? So that's kind of intriguing. That it was like this time of like racing games. You know, I almost missed this because now it's like these racing games we get are these huge, overly ambitious things that take multiple years, like several years sometimes, to kind of throw out and put together. And they're like missing content, if that makes sense. Wow, my driving. I was commenting on how well I was driving, and then I was just getting worse and worse. So, yeah, it is very intriguing that it's like you get these huge projects, but back in the day, you used to get, you know, this whole series of 4 games was literally several years. And then I don't think we'll necessarily ever see this series return either, which is a bit of a shame. And then, you know, with the licensing of all the cars and the vehicles, it's like, good luck ever making this one available. And that in itself is a bit of a shame because, again, I actually quite like PGR. You don't really necessarily need it because you have the Forza series, like I mentioned, but it's still kind of a cool franchise that did its own sort of thing as well, which is interesting. Next race. Yeah, one thing you really don't see is the loading times. This game takes a very, very long time to load, and I forgot to switch my car, so I do apologize for that. But, yeah, no, the loading times on this one are kind of genuinely long. It is funny, though, because, like, as soon as you get into the race, it wastes, like, absolutely 0 time. As soon as it loads, it's 0. It literally just goes countdown timer 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and you were racing, which is, I guess, exciting from the sense that it doesn't have any of that sort of pre-build excitement warm-up where it's like, oh, the racers are getting, you know what I mean? It's just like right into the action, but you have to wait. What I would say is kind of an excessively long amount of time before the race kind of gets into it. I think I'm just spoiled by the modern era, as to say, of racing games and stuff where you just gotta jump right into the mix. So a big part of this one was that it was centered around a few distinct cities. And you had multiple tracks within those cities, but it was specifically based around those locales. So it was Vegas, Tokyo, New York, and London. And then the Nuremberg map, which we just showed, like that track. And then there was like a little bit of customization stuff you could do back in the day, but yeah, that was the idea here, was that it was very specifically set around these locations and racing within these different sections, which I think was kind of neat for the series at the time. And then they boasted over 80 licensed cars from 30 manufacturers. I really should have switched cars so you could see different models, but whatever, this one's fast and fun. So that was kind of a big sticking point for this series, was, you know, it had a good selection of cars, had some interesting tracks, and as I said, you know, it may be 4 locations, but there really is a distinct selection of tracks within that. You know, all of them have different things. Is that Subway right there? That's kind of funny. I think that's what we were noticing in the other PGR game we played. It was based in, I think, New York as well, and we were kind of driving through it, and there was all these ads for different buildings, and I do ponder if those companies paid for those ads to be in there or what, because you could definitely tell that these are kind of low-res city building scans that they throw in, and they're trying to, for the era, it's actually a pretty, oh, there's McDonald's, pretty accurate representation of the section. And the next race, and I continue going along here. It's quite a gap for loading into these things. It's quite something. So we're here in Vegas now, which is kind of fun. You get to see some of the areas built up. This is like a Tropicana road or something like that. I don't know. It was a neat era. I think it was a very impressive and well-needed kind of game to launch the hardware with. I think it definitely did present something that was kind of appealing and really captured racing in some real locations. Oh, here we literally have the main area of Vegas. I've walked down these areas. It's kind of funny. I've actually, you know, I do CES, so I've been to, literally, I've stayed at this place, the Excalibur, here multiple times. This is almost a bit of a time capsule of the era. I wonder about the, you know what, that's the main reason you'll never see these games come back for, like, backwards compat or anything like that. The license, could you imagine trying to get the licensing for these, like, buildings and stuff? You got the Monte Carlo and stuff. Does that, I think that's a different name and everything now, and Wow, this is literally Vegas. How did they even get the licensing to all these buildings back in the day? Like, that's so weird that they were able to actually accomplish that. I think these are actual casino buildings too now. This is fascinating in the most interesting of ways that this literally is Vegas. Wow, that is pretty cool. I'm blown away. Yeah, that's the MGM right there. We just passed it on the right, but I've literally like walked these places doing CS over and over again. I think on the left there that became like an empty lot, and I still don't know if they've built anything there at this point. There is that one event that happened and stuff too, right? So it's a bit of a weird situation, Vegas. It's a fascinating city of, you know, these luxury kind of casino buildings and everything. It really is. It's genuinely a fascinating setup. And then they got the Xbox 360 logos everywhere. I do ponder if the 360 logo spots used to be like in-game ads once upon a time. You'd really have to kind of go back and take a look at those ones. I can't get over how jaggedy it all looks too. That's really hard, I think, for you to see because where you're maybe watching it, but like everything is so jaggedy. The cars, the backdrop, the further back you go, the more jaggedy lines it is. But of course, back in the day, this would have been like super high resolution fidelity and stuff. On to the next race. And we're off in Tokyo. Wow, the crowd's literally like low resolution color splashes, which is kind of funny. The racing like changes for graphics are so fascinating. Even this series alone, when you go from PGR 1 to 4, just the fidelity improvements are absolutely mind-blowingly fascinating. As they went from, you know, these flat images to basically more 3D models, and then the 3D models in the environment getting more and more realistic and in depth, and it's really genuinely intriguing. Just the innovation we've seen over the years in racing games. Also the models of the cars. I guess this was a big upgrade for them because they had tens of thousands of more polygons stuffed into these cars to allow for like more shapely vehicles with more dynamic edges and stuff to them. Oh, the tight turns of a Japan racetrack. Oh. Yeah, that's hard to deal with. MGM Mirage? The Mirage. Isn't it the Grand now or something? I don't know. It's interesting that that branding carried over. So they definitely, you know, if it was a sponsored thing or paid to be included in the game. But it is interesting because nowadays, as I said, oh, this is Mad Catz? Is that a Mad Catz advertising? You know, nowadays it would be like a nightmare and a half to actually get all of these brands included in this game. And at least this is a rock steady like frame rate, I guess you would say. That's really interesting for its time, because I was actually reading up about it before this. There was quite a few targets where they were really wanting to achieve 60 FPS and stuff, and you know, the end results is really quite interesting for that. I do ponder the overhead and everything that exists for this one, but yeah, at least it is pretty rock solid stuff. It's neat. Like I'd really, you know, honestly should have done a bit of a binge read, go from like one, I guess you would say, PGR game to the next would have been a funny kind of thing to do. And I don't know why it took me so long to do this one. This was my first PGR and the one I've held on to the longest, the one I've owned the longest, and I just kind of basically neglected to check it out for some reason, which is fascinating. I still need to do, I think it's the first one I haven't been able to find yet. Yeah, but this one I actually had since the 360 era. But it's the other games where I'm kind of just sitting there being like, you know, I don't know where I'd even get PGR for the original, but yeah, this 360 game I've had forever. kind of a bit of a classic of my library, as to say, which is a funny thing. I don't even know my progress and all that in this one. I remember putting in time to try to get like the plats and working towards that. I remember it being very hardcore back in the day. You know, even poppin' wise, it handles that all very well. Most of the track you can see almost all the time, and you actually feel like you're driving in a city, you know, where dreams are driven, and that's what we've been racing towards. All those old slogans they have for racing games from Xbox and Samsung. So you're still getting some ad value out of these all these years later. I don't even know if all these companies still exist. Well, Mad Catz, I think, was rebranded or something at some point and sold off and closed and rebranded. And yeah. It's very interesting, honestly. Just fascinating doing this stuff, going back and playing these games so many years on is really, really quite an intriguing endeavor. And capturing them at a higher, kind of the best quality we can at the time is interesting too. I mean, obviously not altering how they look, but the preview window for the video capture looks way sharper than the 4K screen kind of does for this one, which is neat, but on to another race. There's so much downtime between races. It's probably not even bad if I was to count the, you know, the seconds and stuff like that, but it is so noticeable. I also love the idea of these cars being, you know, kind of new cars at the time and stuff, and now them being these sort of relic antiques almost in this era is kind of funny. I'm sure these were top of the line back in the day. I guess I should also mention, while we are kind of just doing races, there actually is a selection of different game types to compete against others with, so not all just street racing. There's a plethora of different kinds of choices. I guess this almost feels as though this franchise kind of really was almost succeeded by, like, was it that Grid series? And I don't know if Grid's still going to be around or anything, or if that's kind of gone too. But yeah, I don't know. Forza Motorsport kind of does this, but Motorsport's more professional tracks, right? Whereas this is more city street racing. Honestly, I do wonder if you could do a fork of Forza and then let's call it PGR and have it be like actual street areas. But then again, I guess the cost on kind of getting these areas nowadays would probably be pretty prohibitive, I would think, licensing wise. That was it? That was all? That was like 2 seconds. Oh no. Oh no, not again. Yeah, I guess the issue was that I had HSBC. I think that's still a thing. I had said it's only one lap. Somehow it reset. I was like, oh no. At least you get to see more cars and more track areas. I guess that's kind of rewarding from a video perspective if you wanted to see as much as you could of this game. At least we get to showcase even more of it. Oh, you've got to be kidding me. I still think the back, like some of these cars still have like a very, and I know there's a big polygon jump between entries, but they still have like a weirdly flat kind of appearance that I think only really got sorted out towards almost the end of the generation for that era, then moving into the next gen for racing games. Unbelievable. I thought I didn't do this one. Maybe this is just like some of the street is definitely memorable from the previous race we did. Unless maybe it's just the same area, but kind of the track's done in a slightly different way, which would make quite a lot of sense to me. I wonder how much they paid for the ad inclusions back in the day. Hope that's like a big leak that happens someday, is like the breakdown of all these old franchises, and we can like take a look and be like, oh, this billboard was worth X amount, and you know, like long-term value and investment out of it. Because I guess it'd be a bit of a gamble, right? It's the same as like movies that get ads in them and stuff. I guess games would be like, you know, the amount of eyeballs checking them out and seeing stuff. That's why it's always funny too when people talk about and complain about like ads in video games, and it's like they kinda always been there, the product placement and stuff. You almost get slightly less of it in the modern era though, because licensing is really hard to keep up for things. And they're very short-sighted on video games. There was no long-term plan. You know, you kind of made a game, it went out, people played it, or they didn't, and then you made the next one, and that was the biz. Now there's a lot more longevity to it, so you gotta be careful about this stuff. Holy, my PGRing has gone off the roads.